I'm Mars Hottentot, and this is Brok'n Music, the podcast about broken music. What the hell is broken music? Broken music is a lot of things. It could be a band of enthusiastic kids with more desire than talent, a burning need so great they soldier on into the musical abyss, committing to record audio atrocities so profound they live on while their better talented peers fade into their makers' basements. It could be an aging artist or band, teetering over the hill of relevance, grasping hold the raging locomotive of the zeitgeist, only to have their skulls cracked like coconuts by the wheels of not really getting it. It could be an iconoclast whose aesthetic choices forever keep them within the frozen tundra of the underground, beyond the gates of the glittering city of mainstream acceptance. For those about to starve, hello and welcome to another episode of Brok'n Music. This is episode 3. I'm Mars Hottentot and I'm here with Vee H. Say
hello.
Hey. And this episode we're going to get into RTX and their 2007 sophomore effort, Western Xterminator, also known as RATS, but that's RATX. I'm going to guess that a lot of you out there have no idea who RTX is. I don't want to get too deep into the history of where RTX was birthed from because we're going to do a whole nother episode on the lead singer Jennifer Harema's prior band, Royal Trucks. But I will say that Royal Trucks were a popular late 80s, all through the 90s, kind of deconstructed blues kind of group, definitely avant-garde. Every record sounded different, but there was definitely a damaged blues thing going on. Sometimes it would be very noisy and hard to listen to. Others were very accessible, but throughout it all, they were kind of blues damaged. So after 2000, Royal Trucks broke up. If you know anything about Royal Trucks, it's probably that they were pretty heavy drug abusers. They were both heroin addicts. Of course, they had basically kicked their habits by the mid-90s, but that was their thing. I mean, Jennifer Harema actually became kind of the Calvin Klein heroin chic girl. She was in a bunch of modeling shoots, so you might have seen her in one of those. She was very popular at the time. But they had cleaned up. Then in the early 2000s, well, in 2000, Jennifer's father fell ill with cancer and died very quickly after finding out that he had it. She couldn't really handle it, and she lapsed back into habit. Neil Haggerty, her husband at the time, the lead guitar player and co-songwriter of Royal Trucks, did not want to go back to that life, understandably, and they ended up breaking up. Neil ended up going and doing a bunch of really bizarre, harmonic, free jazzy kind of jam band records almost immediately. I think he had already put out one solo record before they broke up. After that, he never stopped, and Jennifer kind of disappeared for 3 or 4 years and came out with a new band called RTX and a record called Transmaniacon. Now, first off, RTX was a contraction of Royal Trucks that the band had used in promotional materials, posters, and things like that before. So that seemed weird that she would continue on that kind of thing without Neil, because Neil's guitar style and his voice is so key. It's like the other half of that equation. And then when you listen to the record, it's nothing like Royal Trucks. I mean, it's definitely damaged. It's definitely on an art rock tip, but instead of this kind of Rolling Stones and 70s rock kind of vibe that Royal Trucks have always played around with, RTX's bread and butter is 80s FM rock, like Foreigner and stuff like that. Also, hair metal. So around the time that Western Xterminator dropped, we found out that RTX actually meant Rad Times Xpress, which is a pretty good name, but clearly that wasn't the way it started. Now, for an indie rock band to be bringing these sounds in 2004, that was pretty fucking weird. And I'm going to be honest, I was not a fan. I am an old fart. I loved Royal Trucks. I was not into hair metal in the 80s. I was into thrash metal and hardcore punk and hair metal and stuff like that, and just not my bag. Did not like it. So I slept on this band. And the record we're discussing today, Western Exterminator, I didn't hear at all when it first came out because, unfortunately, I wrote this band off. So I didn't hear it when it came out in 2007. I didn't hear the follow-up, JJ Got Live Rats. I didn't hear that either. I don't even remember why I picked this record up, but I'm glad that I did because it blew my mind. So what's going on Western Exterminator? Okay, let me get back to Transmaniacal, the first record, really quick. Again, a big influence of hair metal and FM radio like Foreigner, Loverboy, that type of thing, but just really mutated.
Just chippy.
A strange version of this type of thing. Now, Jennifer Harema is almost like the perfect vision of what you'd want in like a real hard-ass rock singer, in that she's like,
cocaine, fur, and denim.
Constant sunglasses, long bangs, hair down her ass type chick, boots. She's a hard ass, right? But she's not the world's greatest singer. She sounds like she's puffing down cigarettes every moment that she's awake, and probably for a couple hours after she goes to bed. It's a rough kind of thing. Now, in Royal Trucks, Neil had a kind of accessible voice, and they would sing together, and her kind of shambolic approach was leavened by his classic kind of approach, and it really worked well together. Here, she doesn't have him. So what they end up doing on Transmaniacon is they affect the living shit out of her voice. We're talking vocoders, auto-tune, pitching, all kinds of crazy shit. And it kind of turns it into digital mud. When I first heard it, I hated it. Now, I think it's okay. On Western Exterminator, everything kind of gets put through the meat grinder and just makes for one hell of an experience. What was your first impressions upon hearing this record?
So for me, I was a teen in the 90s, so hair metal was really not my thing. Now that I'm older, I feel like I've kind of made peace with it. And for me, I think I liked this album because it wasn't straight up hair metal. It was like a damaged hair metal. Mm-hmm. And I think that I still have issue with just straight up hair metal.
No, me
It's
too.
just very cheesy to me. So to me, the fact that it was damaged kind of took the cheese out of the hair metal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I enjoyed it. This was, out of our 3 podcasts so far, this is one that I genuinely enjoyed and would listen to on my own.
Yeah. So Brok'n music, I feel like I don't want people to think that every record that we're going to cover is something that we're just going to shit on. That's not fun for me. I feel like the Celtic Frost episode we did was a bad record, but it's also a very fun record, and I would recommend it to anyone that wants to have a good time. It's a funny record. Black Flag, the second one we did, that's a genuinely bad record, and it was not a fun experience. This record, I feel like, had this record come out now, for Zoomers, weird Zoomers that like weird music but also grew up playing like Rock Band or Guitar Hero, they could really get into this record. Whereas I think in the early 2000s or mid 2000s when this record came out, I don't think millennials were into this shit. They were more into post-punk and stuff, or indie rock. And we'll get into that issue later. Okay, so I want to get into what makes this record different than your standard kind of hair metal record. First off, it's not strictly hair metal. There's other things going on here. And that's actually one thing about this record that you should know going in, is that it's pretty inconsistent. There isn't like a solid theme musically going through it. For one thing, the opening track, known as Western Exterminator, the title track, which is also called Rats.
He's hiding in some
We'll get into
rat
why
hole.
that is later as well. It has nothing to do with anything else on this record. It's a mellow, folky song. It does have some electric guitar going on, but it's mostly acoustic strumming, some bongos and flute. You know, it's very laid back. It's got nothing to do with the rest of the record. There's some songs on here. Woe Woe Din is very much an early death metal type track. Certainly not hair metal. And in the middle of this, you also have a hardcore punk kind of proto-grunge cover of Fang's The Money Will Roll Right In, which has been done by both Mudhoney and either Kurt sang it or Nirvana did a cover. I can't really remember, but yeah, again, not a very consistent record, but what is going on here is you have a lot of hair metal tropes, a lot of kind of generic riffing going on in the sense that they want you to know that they're
I don't know, it just was chill.
taking
And then there were like
hair metal tropes and deconstructing them. There's a lot of psychedelic guitar going on here in the lead department. I read a lot of reviews for this record, and there's a lot of complaining about Guitar Hero twiddly stuff. But that's not really true. If you listen to the form of what Brian McKinley's playing, it has a lot more to do with, I would say his main influence is probably Eddie Hazel from Funkadelic. It's definitely 70s damaged soloing. It's not Eddie Van Halen Twiddle Wizard material at all. A lot of psychedelic effects, delays, phases, everything's going through something. And then there's a lot of counterpointing on the riffs. Whereas a regular glam hair metal band, hard rock band of the 80s, everybody would be kind of lockstepped in, hitting you with that good time riff. These guys have like this thicket of hair metal craziness going on.
just weird.
And it just makes for an almost overwhelming kind of headbanger. On top of this, you have Jennifer with her super damaged vocals, and that's one other thing about this record that's kind of tough, is that it's hard to tell what she's saying because she's kind of in the mix like another instrument. And with the way her vocals are, it just turns into another element in there. You have to really strain to hear what's going on, and I've listened to this record numerous times. I still couldn't really tell you most of what she's singing.
I did notice, I remember at one point hearing something that sounded a little bit like Poison. There was from Ain't Nothing But a Good Time. I don't know if that's the title, but it was the verse where it's like, I'm real sorry about the shape I'm in.
Yeah. What song was that? That was...
And then there was another song that kind of reminded me of like a Judas Priest, kind of like
Yeah, Last Ride, yeah. I think that might have been Black Bananas was the one that has the poisony feel. There's a lot of like really populist action going on here as far as the titles go. We have a song called Dude Love. Now, Dude Love is the name of a wrestler.
Wait a minute. Steve-O, looks like you could use a little help, my man, like maybe a tag team.
That's Mick Foley, also known as Mankind, also known as Cactus Jack. One of his other characters was this hippie known as Dude Love, so there's that. Also, Last Ride is the finishing move of early 2000s era Undertaker. So that's when I reviewed this on Rate Your Music, I called it a rural outreach program. It's like a Hesher would look at this and be like, oh, cool, wrestling, yeah, I'm on it.
And then I guess they liked the title of Black Bananas so much that they named their subsequent band.
Yes,
right?
yeah. So they put out 3 records as RTX. I guess at some point they had just felt like they had run its course with this style. Also, at the time that they were in, it didn't light the world on fire. They definitely made some mistakes. I feel like being on Drag City, by this point, Drag City is a light psychedelic kind of label. They do a lot of folky stuff. They're not equipped to handle a hard rock band. And I was talking about it yesterday, I feel like this band would have been much better served going out on the road with, say, the Melvins than, I don't know, anyone they went out with, like MGMT or something. Like, I feel like that's great that MGMT liked them and took them out, or Primal Scream took them out. but their audience just is probably not going to warm up to this. And I would say the fact that these records didn't sell, this one in particular did not sell in huge amounts, proves my point.
That was not cool.
Whereas
at all
I was
at
listening
the
to him
time.
being like, the Melvins fan base that are used to damaged metal and like kind of deconstructed metal, they would dig this. This is something they could get behind. I want to get into who's playing on this record. So Jennifer Rema is on vocals, obviously. Kurt Midness is on bass, and I believe that she and Kurt are now married. J-Mo Welch is playing drums. Now, when the first record came out, it was just J-Mo and Jennifer. I think J-Mo literally played everything else on the record, and she sang. But this time around, he's playing drums. Now, one of the reasons why he's playing drums and not guitar is that Jennifer felt like he was too good of a guitar player. Like, he grew up listening to hair metal. His older brothers were really into that stuff, and I guess like his favorite guitar player is Nuno Bettencourt, which she was totally down for that aesthetic, but felt like to be the kind of band she wanted, they needed something a little more damaged and arch. So they went with Brian McKinley. And Brian McKinley, the guitar player that they're using, is definitely... He knows his way around a heavy metal riff, but his solos are definitely not your typical Hesher metal solos. They're definitely 70s damaged acid rock solos. Nadav Eisenman is... I'm not sure what he's playing. I think he is their engineer on this record. I don't think he actually played anything on this record. I could be wrong. I usually am. All right, I'm going to read my rundowns of some of the songs on here. So, Balls to Pass. So this is some straight up first hour Headbangers Ball circa 1988 shit until Jennifer comes in and the chorus turns into a hazy cloud of blunt smoke. And that solo is fucking fried. Black Bananas opens with some psych sludge. Sounds like it's going to go into some 70s Quaalude squishy soft rock, but then comes the hard right turn into the metal sound. Dude Love, part of the RTX Rural Outreach Program, name-checking Mick Foley again. The song itself consists of some mid-80s sleaze metal with some fucked up guitar tones, Jennifer not really giving a shit if her vocals are in key or even fit. This is still coming from like a noise, psych rock kind of point of view. I already talked about Whoa Whoa Din. Okay, so Nightmare in Maine. This is kind of their take on the ballad. And I said, here's some butt rock for the acid gobblers. It's the perfect mix of lavender cowboy boot and hanky headband ballad with a psych noise freak side. It's all big anthemic stadium melodies that everything's tripping on four-way window pane. I feel like that kind of sums up the record. It's like definitely commercial sounds that are just being fed through a meat grinder. It's pretty wild. It's catchy, but it's fucking crazy. Restoration Sleep, that's probably... They should have made this a single. This would be some generic sub-GNR second-hour Headbangers Ball crap, were it not for all the melting delays, cavernous reverbs, and fuzz. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. The Last Ride. So when this record dropped in 2007, almost immediately they had a problem. The record's called Western Exterminator. And apparently there's an LA extermination company that kills rats called Western Exterminator, and they gave the band a cease and desist.
I was freaking out.
Because the CD never got repressed. In fact, nothing that this band has done has ever been re-released. They never bothered to recall any of the CDs and never got renamed. but the record hadn't come out yet. The vinyl edition hadn't come out yet. So they ended up scrapping all the covers and rushed it out with a white label, a black cover, and renamed the title and the title track Rats. Like I said at the beginning, that's RATX. Rats. So, yeah, and I think the record is limited edition, but because this is not a super loved record, you can still get it really cheap, and I highly recommend that you do. It's a fucking killer record. Do you have any thoughts?
I can't help but think that's super lame for the Exterminators to sue them over that.
It's like, not even spelled the same.
Yeah, Western Exterminator is
Company.
such a generic name. I'm trying to think of an equivalent. I can't think of an equivalent, but
I don't know how they found out. I mean, this stuff is super obscure. It's just boggling. How did they know?
Yeah, and it's not like they were trash talking
Western
Western
Exterminator
Exterminator.
Right, there's a
In
song
the
about
song,
how much they hate
how
Western
it's
Exterminator.
terrible.
Company.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
It would be like if Microsoft sued someone for calling their album Windows. And, Windows, Western, it's such a generic term that all of a sudden, like, no one can use that now. It's kind of silly.
Really bad.
And there's no crossover in your market either, probably,
Yeah. Well, I was just trying to look something up. Vice Media, who you'd think are cool and wouldn't do something like this, did a cease and desist on a band called Vice Versa, saying that it could confuse consumers. Like, shut the fuck up with that shit. Are you kidding me?
Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, those things always annoy me. It's also a thing of like a corporation bringing the hammer down on a really small group. It's like when U2 brought the hammer down on Negative Land.
Right.
And Negative Land was like, look, we're gonna sell maybe 5,000 copies of this album, if that. And you're like bringing full force of like legal teams against us.
Well, when you're U2, apparently U2 didn't even know about it until it was already in full swing. So that's what happens when you work for a corporation that has a bunch of lawyer bats just flying around the culture looking for new bodies to feed on, So, yeah. I would highly recommend this to anybody who likes noise rock, psychedelic rock, and hair metal, but you gotta, really hit that reefer if you're a hair metal person. You might want to be really high when you listen to this record. It's definitely unique. There aren't a whole lot of records like this out there. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say about this. I love it. It's one of my favorite records of that era. I slept on it. I'm glad that I went back and reassessed because it's fantastic.
Are we doing a live Brok'n meter or a robot Brok'n meter?
Well, let's lead in to the robot Brok'n meter. So, Brokometer.
We weren't supposed to clap.
Oh,
Brokometer. Level buffering.
7.
What challenged me